Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel where we do painting tutorials. For today I have a intermediate watercolor pencil landscape, and I start by coloring the bottom of my sky with some ultramarine blue, and for the middle section of my sky I'm going to use phthalo blue because I want to build up sort of a gradient. I want the bottom to be a bit foggy, which is what I'm using ultramarine for. I want the top to be very saturated, so for the top left corner I will use helium blue reddish, which is my darkest blue. If I have any empty spaces left, I just go over with my lightest shade, so in this case ultramarine. That's how I build up a very simple gradient effect, meaning a sort of a transition, if you will. And I'm going to blend this with a number 8 brush, which is a bit bigger than my normal Da Vinci brush. Feel free to use a reservoir one, but I just could not find mine, so I'm using a very basic student grade watercolor brush. It's synthetic fiber, so it does not hold much water, meaning I need to dip it a bit more often into my water jar to get a smooth effect. If you're curious, this is by Koh-I-moor, and it's the same brand of my other watercolor pencils. I just found a freebie of their brushes within the pencil set and I liked it, so I bought 2 more, and the price for 2 was like €2.50 or €3. Just to let you know, it's cheap and it's not the fanciest of art supplies. Use whatever you have on hand. While that dries, I work on my bottom field and I do a base layer of earthy green. Just color it entirely with some medium pressure, because since it is in the foreground, it is going to be a bit more saturated than all of the other things we're gonna have going on in the back. I layer some cadmium yellow on top for some highlights, and I do some random bits with my dark blue with the helium blue reddish, and I go over the dark blue with some cadmium orange. The reason being, blue and orange neutralize each other and they're going to make a nice shadow look, a nice shadow effect. Then I switch to a smaller brush. Since I'll be working on a smaller area, I don't need the bigger one. It's just a bit easier also with water control to use an appropriate size brush for the area you're working on. Don't paint a huge background with a tiny brush, and there's really no point in doing small details in small areas with a big brush. Like, you can do it, but it's just going to complicate your life unnecessarily. While the green field dries, I take my ultramarine from before and I scribble a very tiny mountain in the background, and I go over just with the tip of my brush. Then I work on the fields we're going to have in between. Again, I start with my earthy green for a base just on that top section right there, and I'm going to add some like workable fields, like wheat fields. And to do so, I'm going to layer all of my earthy shades I have in the set. I start with some raw umber. I use some light green on top of my earthy green just to get some highlights from where the sun is hitting these fields. Then I go with some dark chrome yellow under that raw umber, and I'm just going to layer the remaining earthy shades, so some yellow ochre, some Venetian red, and I'm going to finish the bottom with some walnut brown. I just want to add all of the colors I have in my set. If you have different ones, feel free to use those. But what this does is it gives the layer a bit more depth, and it makes it look a bit more natural in my opinion, rather than just using 1 or 2 shades of brown. If you use 1 or 2 colors, it may look more flat. You can obviously layer more as you go, but I just like to give everything my set has to offer in the very first layer and then just finish it with some details like some trees or some added shadows later on. Right now I just want to apply everything so I get a nice color base to work with. I go over with just the tip of my brush. I actually press the bottom of the bristles, they're closest to the middle piece, onto my piece of tissue so the tissue soaks it up and it's not as wet, because I really want barely any water for this. And if you end up with some extra texture, that's perfectly fine. It's actually very useful for the look I'm trying to get here. Then for that bottom piece under that hill we have, I'm repeating the same exact steps. I start with some earthy green on the very top, and I'm going to layer my earthy colors as I go down. So I do green on the very top edge, then some yellow ochre, raw umber, walnut brown, Venetian red as I go down. And I go on top again just with the tip of the brush, and this is the small brush. I believe this is a number 6, just enough to activate them and make them more vibrant. If I have any empty spaces left over, places where the brush skipped, I go over again with my lightest shade, which in this case is my dark chrome yellow. I also apply it randomly throughout the green field to balance it a bit more out and make it coherent with the wheat fields we did, because I don't think I used that yellow for the green field. I just used some cadmium yellow. This way it sort of balances it out. Then I add a bit more definition, a bit more shadows. This is what I mentioned by saying I just want to throw everything in my first layer, and then if I need some extra shadows, I'm gonna do that layer. I take the walnut brown, I outline the fields on the bottom between of the earthy tones and the green. I'm gonna add some division lines, just some vertical lines to separate the wheat fields. Then I take my earthy green again and I'm doing some random blobs, some random scribbles, which are going to be trees. On the top side, on the top right side of each and every one of them, I'm going to add a bit of my dark chrome yellow for a highlight, because I want the sun to be king from that side, and since these are on top of the hill and opposite to it, the hill is not casting its shadow, so the sunlight is free to hit from that area. And I broke my dark blue pencil, but I purchased a brand new one, same exact tone. They just offer them, you're out of black, you're out of brown, you can just buy that specific pencil without having to repurchase the whole entire set. That's genius. So I got the new blue color, same helio blue, and I applied on the bottom left side of all of my trees. For a shadow, go on top of it with some orange to neutralize the blue, drying the bottom of my brush, and I'm just using the tip to activate this. I try to go from the yellow towards the green towards the blue, so going from light to dark, but these are very tiny, so you don't need to follow that rule 100%. I also added a bunch of trees or big bushes, depends on how you view it, on top of the hill, and I go over that. Then with some walnut brown, I'm going to add the tree trunks, just some tiny I shapes and V shapes like I and V, the letters. Just some tiny lines beneath all of them. And for the ones that are very, very far up in the distance, just a dot because it's barely visible. Beneath them, I add a horizontal line with my dark blue for a shadow. I try to put more on the left side of the tree because, like I said, the sunlight I want to be coming from the top right, so the shadow goes on the opposite side, which is the bottom left. Then I go on top of the blue with some walnut brown, and I do a good amount of shadow on top of the hill because of those trees we have there. I'm not going to activate this, I'm just going to leave it as is because I like the texture. And lastly, I'm gonna take again my dark brown and go on top of the green field just to add like some wind going through. You know how when it's windy, all of the grass tends to look like waves almost. So I'm just very lightly going on top. And that is it. I'd like to give a very special thank you to my Patreon supporters for the month of January. And thank you all for watching. I hope you found this video useful. Please let me know down in the comments. And if you have not already, please consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps with the algorithm. And we'll see each other in the next video. Bye bye.